Over 400 black Ethiopian Jews, mostly children, died last year in refugee camps just outside Ethiopia's border. A political storm is gathering as activists in Israel and North America charge that the government of Israel and the worldwide Jewish community could have saved the black Jews, but did not. Defeated in battle 400 years ago, deprived of the right to own land, the black Jews of Ethiopia were labeled Falasha, strangers, exiles. Risking imprisonment, torture, and possibly death at the hands of the government authorities, some Falashas managed to escape from Ethiopia. A handful have made it to the west, including Agony, who now lives in Montreal.
So I just sometimes I couldn't understand it, why we should suffer. I mean, what we done? We are innocent people, we are not criminal. We just a black and Jew who like to preserve, which we were keeping this religion, I don't know for how long, in Ethiopia, more than 2,000 years. Just that we try to give our life for that specific, because we felt we are not guilty.
Up until the 17th century, the Falashas ruled much of the ancient and mysterious land of Abyssinia, their own independent kingdom in the isolated but strategic Horn of Africa. The black Jews still live in the remote and spectacular Simeon Mountains and along the shores of Lake Tana, the source of the legendary Blue Nile. With an average annual income of just $117 per person, Ethiopia is one of the poorest countries on earth. 85% of its population live off the land, using methods which have not changed for hundreds of years. There is one doctor per 75,000 Ethiopians, and a recent survey rated the country as having the lowest quality of life on earth. The capital city, Addis Ababa. Struggling desperately to modernize, Addis Ababa is a third world capital gamely trying to catch up with the rest of the world. Once financed primarily by America and the West, Ethiopia was ruled for 44 years by the world's last emperor, Haile Selassie, the Lion of Judah, who claimed descent from King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba. In 1974, Selassie's paternalistic, poverty-stricken domain was convulsed by the all-too-familiar Third World Coup. Led by a group of frustrated young army officers who called themselves the Derg, they claimed to have ignited a Marxist revolution. A bloody 5-year civil war ensued, causing much suffering and dislocation throughout the country. The 82-year-old Selassie died in prison, and the revolutionaries emerged triumphant. Aware of the power of the 1,500-year-old Ethiopian Coptic Church, which owned 40% of the land, the revolutionary government was quick to imprison the Coptic Patriarch and appoint their own. Just 2 religions are tolerated in the new socialist state, Coptic Christianity and the well-entrenched Muslim faith. Each represents about half the country's population. All other faiths, Catholic, Protestant, Lutheran, Baptist, and Jewish, are now subjugated to the official belief in the new state of Ethiopia. Shooting surreptitiously through an airport window, our crew filmed Ethiopia's President Mengistu, the short man in the center, escorting Yugoslav President Petar Stembolic to review the elite of Africa's largest army. Mengistu has developed strong ties with the Soviet bloc. Faced with an ongoing civil war with Eritrean guerrillas in the north, more recent battles with US-backed Somalia in the south, and outbreaks of counter-revolutionary resistance throughout the country, most villages are tightly controlled by the military, with strict curfews and travel permits a regular part of life. Though long aware of their existence, until recently, outsiders took little interest in the Ethiopian Jews. In 1969, American writer Meyer Levin shot this documentary film on the Falashas. At the time, the Jews were allowed to practice their religion, though they lived in extreme poverty. Founder of the American Association for Ethiopian Jews, Dr. Grenham Berger first visited the Falashas 18 years ago.
And what I saw was horrible suffering. I saw poverty, the likes of which I had never seen anywhere else in the world, and I've been to 85 countries, and I know what poverty can be like in many of the backward and undeveloped countries of the world. So here were these people who wanted to go to Israel. In fact, 40 letter, the remnants of Israel, begging to be lifted up on the wings of eagles like their co-religionists across the Red Sea brought to Israel.
But neither Selassie's government nor the new revolutionary regime would let them leave Ethiopia. They remained landless, destitute peasants, trapped in their villages, the prisoners of a government which insisted that the Jews were imprisoned. They escaped from Ethiopia just after the revolution.
When I say suffering, probably people, you don't have any right except you have the air, the sun free, that's all. You cannot, because it's not belong to you, or you cannot bury the dead for your land. That's much we suffer in that place.
In Barak's home province of Gondar, in northern Ethiopia, the government pressured the Jews and joined the communist fold. When the Falashas refused, the government responded by closing their villages to all tourists, including our film crew. Our Ethiopian Tourist Commission guide, Worku Sheru, explained his government's policy toward the Jews.
And the bad side about Judaism is that they are still waiting to go back to Jerusalem. And that's Ethiopians, and the sooner they are Ethiopians, they've been here. And that's the reason, we don't want the people to, these people to think there's another place. And it's because of that you're not allowed to go visit and film the village.
The Falashas had not been filmed since the revolution. Our crew was determined to reach them. This is their report.
As we drove north into the Simeon Mountains, we began to realize that having come 10,000 miles, all we would go home with would be fleeting shots of Falasha villages shot out the window of our land cruiser. Tension between the film crew and our guide mounted as Worku warned us that any footage we shot of Ethiopian Jews would be confiscated by the government authorities.
Guys from the West, you have a fixation.
I don't have a fixation.
You do. Let's
I'm
go.
interested in all...
No, really, let's go. Let's risk it. I don't have a... But if you lose all this film, and you have to be cool. Just like as you want this, you must be ready to lose your film. This, you must be ready right now.
And how would it happen that we would lose the...
You would lose it. That's certain.
Why?
I mean, it will be confiscated. It will be returned to you after security went all through it and see that there are no shots of Falasha.
Yeah.
Listen, I'm not trying to stop you from going. I'm not to frighten you, but you must be ready to take what is.
The consequence.
The consequences. And anybody who can take the consequences is free to can break laws and do whatever. But you have to be cool when it comes to consequences.
Yeah. Early next morning, high up in the Simeon Mountains, we planned a ride by horseback down into the most remote valleys of Ethiopia. We were now accompanied by an army officer carrying a Soviet AK-47 rifle, who boasted that he had killed 8 student rebels during Ethiopia's bloody civil war. Our trek through the valley took 10 hours, and Worku began to soften, saying that he would not stop us from filming Falashas if we stumbled upon one of their villages. Finally, we arrived at a broad plain in the valley basin. Perched on a promontory across a small stream was the Falasha village of Shawada. Our tired horses climbed the steep trail, and there they were, standing nervously behind a fence of brambles and branches, a community of 200 proud but frightened Ethiopian Jews. Shawada is typical of the 400 or so Falasha villages scattered among these hills. Denied the right to own land, the Falashas survived as metalworkers, but because of their work with fire, they are shunned as possessors of the evil eye. Superstitious Ethiopians believe that they can cast spells, and the Jews are often blamed for calamities like drought and disease. In a land of extreme poverty, the Falashas are still the poorest of the poor. Watched carefully by our gun-toting guard, a few men said they would answer our nervous questions.
Are they still able to carry on their religion here in this village?
Are you still able to carry on your religion in this village?
Yes, around here. Our religion is different. There are many of us. We believe in the Torah.
What do you call yourselves?
The House of Israel. The House of Israel.
Apprehensive about our guard and guide, and unsure that they could trust us, the Falashas answered evasively.
Do they know about Israel and all that?
No, you'd ask.
Do you know of a country by the name of Israel?
Foreign country? No, we have no way of knowing.
We were born in Ethiopia, but we've heard rumors. We don't know if this place is in the country or outside. These days we listen to the radio and hear about what goes on outside the country. We hear Israel mentioned, but ourselves we were born here.
They have heard of it by radio, but they have been born, their forefathers have been born.
As our questions became more political, Worku's translations became colored with his government's views of the place of the Falashas in Ethiopia.
But they're happy to be in Ethiopia.
Are you happy to be living in Ethiopia? Even if you are not happy, you haven't got a choice.
What can we do?
These people here think you have a connection with Israel, but you are Ethiopians, whether you like it or not. This is your country.
Yes, we are just simple people. We don't know about these things.
Has it changed for them since the revolution? Has it got better for them here?
Has it become better for you since the revolution?
Sure, the laws are good. For example, the law concerning land distribution and the laws concerning equal work opportunities. But the peasants' associations which were set up to implement these new laws for the benefit of the poor have not done so, and we are still suffering. The hunger, the anguish is still on our shoulders. We still carry the burden even now. Nevertheless, the government did pass new laws. It's the Peasants' Association which refused to implement them when it comes to us.
We work hard, but they take it from us without paying.
You mean you make it and you give it to them for free?
Angry at such criticism, our guard intervened, and Worku stopped translating.
They don't leave us anything. If they pay us very little.
You don't get any money for your work?
Most of the time, they don't pay.
Why? There's a Peasants' Association.
Forget about the Peasants' Association. All they care about is themselves.
If they hear about this, they will take some action. But to say that you work for nothing, that's not good to say. There is a Peasants' Association. There's a local governor working on these problems. You shouldn't say that.
The revolutionary government has outlawed the teaching of Hebrew, insisting that the Jews attend the state-run schools. But away from our guard and guide, speaking in halting Hebrew, one young man showed us his hidden Hebrew schoolbook.
It's mine. It was given to me.
And you study Hebrew?
I study Hebrew here.
You study here?
Yes.
Alone?
There was a man. One man. He was my instructor. I got my book when I studied in Gondar.
Until 3 years ago, in the provincial capital town of Gondar, a Jewish development organization ran a clinic and Hebrew schools for both elementary and high school students in these buildings. But the project was closed down by the tough provincial governor, Major Malaku, a prominent member of the Derg, who runs his province like a military camp. Outspokenly anti-Israel, aligning himself with the Arab League, Malaku welcomed Libyan troops in Gondar province. He padlocked all synagogues and warned the Falashas that if they tried to escape his territory, they would be imprisoned, tortured, or killed. One Falasha woman who escaped from Gondar province agreed to tell us her story.
Start by telling me how you first escaped.
What happened to you when you first thought of leaving Ethiopia?
Afraid of the retribution this interview might bring her family still living in Ethiopia, we promised to carefully hide her identity.
When I first thought of leaving for Israel, I didn't think I'd have problems along the way. I traveled a long distance over many roads. We were robbed by bandits along the way. Our legs were scratched and cut by thorns. We had blisters on our feet and we were hungry. It rained all the time. We came to a small village. Nearby there was a big river. When we tried to cross it, we were caught. After 10 days had gone by, they came and took us away by helicopter. They took us from there and put us in a jail. They asked us, "Who are your relatives in Israel? Who is your contact in Israel? Who is the contact between yourselves in that country? Is there somebody encouraging you to leave? What are your problems here? Why do you want to go there?" Then they started to beat us with a metal bar to force us to speak. We started to scream. After that, they put a stick between our legs with a point under our chin. Then they lifted our legs until we were upside down. They tied our thumbs with leather and put them over our heads and tied them back there.
Did you ever see Malaku?
Did you see Malaku?
Yes. He came to the prison when they released us. He decided not to release 8 of us. He warned us repeatedly not to attempt to escape again. Then he said we could go. But now that you've taken your oath, if you are caught trying to escape again, you will die.
Risking certain death at the hands of Malaku's troops, innumerable diseases and attacks by bandits, more than 2,000 Falashas have made the grueling trek across the border to sprawling refugee camps in Somalia, Djibouti, and the Sudan, in the hope of eventually reaching Israel. Teeming with violence and infested with disease, life in these camps is often worse than the life the Falashas left behind. This UN-administered camp shelters 12,000 Ethiopian refugees. These 6 men had just arrived. Exhausted and malnourished, they were grateful for the meager rations supplied by the international aid organizations. These refugees can leave the camp if they are sponsored by Western governments, but no one has stepped forward to sponsor the Ethiopian Jews. The Falashas here were afraid to talk to us, and we were asked not to endanger them by identifying this camp. Seeking scapegoats for their misery, other refugees have turned on the Jews, and many Falashas have been beaten, mutilated, and killed.
In the last, I think the last 4 months, 600 children died in that refugee camp. Women, children, don't have food. They don't have medical treatment. They try, they try to reach to Jerusalem, and they didn't get it. 600 children. Who's talking about them? Who cares about them? That will be the end of these people.
Under pressure from people like Barak Tegene, in 1980, the Israeli government embarked on a limited program which has brought 2,000 Falashas to Israel. Last November, led by a respected Kohen and the only Ethiopian-born rabbi, they marched to the Western Wall to draw attention to the plight of their families still trapped in the refugee camps and forgotten in Ethiopia. Despite their 3,000 years of strict adherence to a biblical Judaism, it was not until 1975 that the Rabbinical Council in Israel ruled that the Falashas were, in fact, Jews. Having miraculously made it to Jerusalem, the Falashas have been bitterly disappointed by the apathy and lack of support from the government of Israel. There is great controversy about whether Israel has done all it can to help them escape. They continually seek support from political leaders such as Israel's president, Yitzhak Navon.
What a great miracle it is. You're remaining committed to the Jewish tradition and religion.
At a demonstration on Mount Zion, Navon guardedly pledges his support for their cause.
We were glad to see first signs of your arrival in Israel. To our regret, it was only a trickle, and not a massive flow as we would have hoped for. The story is long, and silence is more appropriate at this moment.
Silence is what we faced when we asked for answers from the Israeli government. Members of the cabinet refused to be interviewed on the subject, stressing that the issue involved secret undercover operations and that any discussion of the problem of the Falashas would endanger their lives.
As a man who's been Prime Minister for
We did manage to arrange a strained interview with former Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin.
Can you give the Ethiopian Jews any feeling that something is being done for them?
I'm sure that everything which is feasible and possible is done.
How can you be sure of that?
Because I know what kind of efforts are made, and I believe that talking is very easy, but to do something, it's much more complicated. The kind of efforts which are made are considerable, and since they include risks to the Falashans and to those who are involved, I would not say more about it.
Well, I know that that isn't true because I've been involved with this issue since 1955.
Dr. Grennenberger and other pro-Falasha activists argue that the Israeli government has made only token efforts to save the Jews of Ethiopia.
And what I usually got was promises that something would be done one of these days when they could get around to it. But it never became even an item on the agenda of Israel. This was never on their agenda. There are members of the cabinet who contend that the issue was never raised in all the years that Israel was in power. It was dealt with by a few people, generally on a subordinate level, and left to them. But the point is that they could have all been saved. I think there's deep guilt in the American and the world Jewish community about this problem, but it's a guilt that has not yet been resolved.
Israel has an extraordinary record of helping Jews in distress reach Jerusalem. But the Falashas have been virtually ignored or forgotten.
If there is a brother, when you need him, when you are suffering, you need the brother at that time. That's the only things. We survived without anybody in Ethiopia, without any assistance. We thought we were the only Jews left in the whole world. But we were suffering all our life in that place. Nobody speak for us. Nobody speak up for us.
Why, many are now asking, have Israel, major Jewish organizations, and Western governments ignored this tragedy for so long? Some feel that despite Ethiopia's alliance with the Soviet bloc, the West dreams of regaining this strategic site on the Horn of Africa and is unwilling to embarrass the Ethiopian government with charges of religious persecution. Dr. Berger and others claim that Israel has been practicing a policy of controlled immigration, avoiding helping the Falashas because they do not fit the government's perception of the type of people they want to populate their country. Whatever the reason, the brutal fact is that 20,000 Ethiopian Jews remain prisoners inside their country, and hundreds of Falashas, mostly children, are now dying in squalid border. Less than 40 years after the Holocaust, the world, even most Jews, have so far remained silent.